Charles Duffy, and this is Political Pulse. We're honored tonight to have on Chris Van Hollen, Maryland, or Congressman from Maryland's 8th District, also the top Democrat on the House of Representatives Budget Committee. Thanks so much for joining us.
Great to be with you, Charles.
I know you're extremely busy and really appreciate it. You just spoke at the Democratic Convention, and you kind of used the Republican Convention as a touchstone. They had, when Paul Ryan, the Republican Vice President nominee, spoke, he made a reference to the national debt clock, and they had the debt clock at the Republican Convention ticking off numbers, and you kind of turned the tables on him in your speech, talked about the the votes that he made that kind of related to the debt.
Well, that's right. They had a big debt clock, and the debt is a very serious issue. We've got to deal with the debt. The issue is not whether we deal with it, it's how we deal with it. But there's some Republicans that want to make believe that this debt just popped up when President Obama was elected. The reality, he was handed a record deficit the year he was elected, and that was as a result of many decisions that were made during the Bush era. You had back-to-back tax cuts, 2001, 2003. Then you had two wars that were put on the credit card. Then you had a new prescription drug benefit that wasn't paid for, and that just sent the deficit skyrocketing. I mean, so for that 8 years, you had jobs going down, but the deficit and the debt going way up. In fact, the last time we actually balanced our budget was in 2001. The year that President Clinton left office, because he had a balanced approach to dealing with the deficit.
And of course, a piece of that was the Iraq War. The country went in there. Of course, you didn't vote for the war, but looking for weapons of mass destruction. I'm not sure how history is going to look at that war, but I've read numbers that it's cost $3 trillion, basically all on credit. I mean, it's kind of an important piece of the whole debt puzzle.
Yes, it is, and they're both the direct costs of the war, which are certainly up around over $1 trillion, and then there are all the indirect costs, the costs that will be with us for a very long time, attending to our wounded warriors, making sure that they get the support they need for the rest of their life. I mean, I visit the Walter Reed Military Medical Center often and see these heroes, but that's a commitment our nation has to make for the long term, and it's all part of what it costs, both in terms of lives, wounded warriors, and other costs that the American people have borne.
But if there's no agreement, Chris, I understand that what's going to happen is called a budget sequestration, kind of a big phrase, but automatic cuts to defense, 9.4%, automatic cuts on the domestic side, over 8%, huge axe. It's not going to be pretty, and especially for this area.
Well, this would be very bad for the country. It would be very bad for this region as well, and for Montgomery County, because what will happen on January 1st is that if Congress cannot find an alternative way to reduce the deficit by $1 trillion over 10 years, then you have these automatic buzzsaw cuts take effect on everything, from air traffic controllers to FBI agents to people who work at NIH every day to FDA to defense. And so we've been working very hard to try and find an alternative. And the key is to take the kind of balanced approach that bipartisan groups like Simpson-Bowles have taken, that framework, meaning that you reduce the deficit through a combination, through a mix of cuts, and we already did $1 trillion in cuts last year, but also some revenue from closing some of these tax loopholes.
You were on the Debt Commission, I think it was August 2011, and you were on the show then, and you talked about the balanced approach the Democrats were taking, and I was kind of leery, and I think I asked you, do you think it's going to work out? Do you think there will be compromise? But we've had the two commissions, the Simpson-Bowles Commission 2010, then the Debt Commission that you were on, and the Democrats want taxes on the wealthy to be part of the mix, along with spending cuts. But it just doesn't seem like there's the common ground. But are you? Do you see in the future, Chris, that there's going to be a point where there will be common ground?
Well, it's going to take more than just finding common ground. It's going to require finding compromise. You referred to the Debt Commission, also known as the so-called Super Committee. And I was very disappointed the Super Committee did not work. I thought it was a real opportunity for us to come together with a long-term deficit reduction plan. What happened there is the same thing that's held us up on all the other efforts, which is, unfortunately, the Tea Party folks in the House refuse to take the kind of balanced approach that's been recommended by groups like Simpson-Bowles. They all say that if you're going to really tackle the deficit in a credible way, you have to make additional cuts, you have to make some reforms, but you also need to raise some revenue by closing special interest tax loopholes, like getting rid of subsidies for big oil companies, also asking people at the very high end of the income ladder to go back to paying essentially the same rates they were under the Clinton administration. In fact, a little bit less because they'd continued to get tax relief on the first $250,000 of income, but go back to paying Clinton rates on the amount of income above that. 98% of the Republicans in the House have signed this so-called Norquist Pledge, where they say that they will not raise one penny, it's important to understand this, not one penny of revenue for the purpose of reducing the deficit. And if you ask nothing more of folks at the very top, it means you clobber everybody else in the budget. It means very deep cuts, counterproductive cuts to education, to investments in our infrastructure, shredding the social safety net, passing costs on to seniors and Medicare in a big way. So our view is you should have shared responsibility. And that's what these bipartisan groups called for. That's what I would like to see. Unfortunately, that's a violation of this pledge.
But you have the pledge, the Grover Norquist pledge, but how do you break the deadlock? I mean, you talked about the Tea Party, and a lot of the Tea Party representatives are having tough races. There's talk that, hey, the Democrats are thinking maybe they could take over the House of Representatives, but to break the deadlock, is it going to take the Democrats taking over the House of Representatives? Is it going to take a financial crisis? I mean, what's it going to take?
Well, hopefully it will not take a financial crisis, and I believe we will move before that, certainly in terms of replacing the sequester, which I think we can do at least on an interim basis in the lame duck session as we work toward a longer-term solution. In terms of the larger deal, two things. One is compromise cannot be considered a dirty word. There are a lot of Tea Party Republicans that think that's a dirty word. Now, we do have an opportunity at the end of this year because at that time all the taxes reset to Clinton-era levels, not just for the high income, but for everybody. And Republicans are currently taking the position that nobody gets tax relief. Nobody gets tax relief unless higher income people, people like Mitt Romney, get tax relief. I think that's an unsustainable position. And so as these tax rates reset for everybody, there's then an opportunity to finally get Republicans to agree that very high income individuals have to contribute something toward reducing the deficit. So because of the structure of the law right now, there is an opening here.
You've worked with Republicans on some issues, and I know that you're down there in the trenches and talking to people on both sides of the aisle. You're the top Democrat on the Budget Committee, but are any of the Republicans kind of winking and nodding and signaling to you that, hey, maybe this is possible, maybe compromise is possible, Chris, just wait till after the election or wait to this?
Well, I wish I could say that that was a prevalent view. I mean, there may be a few isolated individuals on the Republican side who have said that, but right now their view is, we're going to take this to the election and it's our way or the highway, and that's got to change regardless of the outcome of this election. I believe the president will be reelected. We are building momentum in the House races, but regardless of the election, it's not enough just to find common ground. The area of common ground is not that large when it comes to deficit reduction. Compromise is necessary. If you and I were sitting down to a negotiation, it would have to be a give and take. There's some stuff that I like, but there's going to have to be some stuff that I don't like. That's the nature of compromise in a democracy. And the difference between functioning government and dysfunctioning government is that willingness to compromise, especially when you have divided government in terms of one party in control of one branch, another party in control of another.
Another piece that I think is an important piece of this puzzle is a statement made by the Senate Minority Leader, Mitch McConnell, a couple years ago. I don't know if this was a slip or what, but he said basically the main priority for the Republicans is defeating Obama. And it was almost as if Republicans are geared to that rather than, I mean, my fear as an American citizen is that, the America is not being put first. Rather, it's about getting the presidency. But is that
That was a very revealing comment by Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader in the Senate, because rather than saying he was focused on jobs first or the economy first, he said that his first priority, that Republicans' first priority was the defeat of President Obama. And if you look at the conduct of Republicans in the House and in the Senate, that's the playbook they followed. They have been relentlessly opposed to the Republican on anything, even when the president proposes things that have been based on Republican ideas. They still say no.
But isn't that kind of worrisome? I mean, I don't go that far back, but historically speaking, when that's the aim, basically, of one of the parties, I mean, that can't be good for the country. But is there some type of flaw in democracy? I mean, the founders certainly would be surprised that this is going on. But is there some type of flaw in democracy that's coming to the surface? Where the presidency is so important, you can nominate people to the Supreme Court and things like that. That takes precedence over what you've talked about, the compromise and working together. I mean,
well, I don't think there's a flaw in democracy. I mean, we're obviously not a perfect system, but as people say,
for lack of a better,
we're the best of all the alternatives, right?
As Winston Churchill said.
Exactly. So. Look, I think that's going to require elections. The American people are going to have to, render a judgment on this. I would just point out that two scholars, Norm Ornstein and Thomas Mann, who were longtime scholars of the Congress, nonpartisan, recently wrote a book where they called the balls and strikes as they see them, and they said, look, the Tea Party element in the House is a new element. It is a destructive element in the sense of its total unwillingness to compromise, its willingness to sort of bring the economy to its knees, as we saw last year with the debate over the debt ceiling, and their willingness to say, we'll allow the United States to default on our full faith and credit for the first time in our history if we don't get the Republican Ryan budget passed. I mean, that was their position. So yeah, until you have a group of people who are willing to have that give and take, willing to compromise, it makes it very difficult to move forward. Now, I do believe that after this election, the president will be reelected, and you're going to see the reset on these tax rates. And so that becomes some incentive to compromise, because on January 1st, when people's withholding notices come out and they're seeing a lot more money taken out of their paycheck, it's no longer going to be sustainable for Republicans to say, hey, you don't get tax relief until people like Mitt Romney get tax relief. I just don't see that being publicly sustainable.
I want to pick up with some of these issues that the Tea Party movement that you talked about, and also talk about some local issues after the break.
Sure.
Congressman Chris Van Hollen from Maryland's 8th District. We'll be right back. We're back with Congressman Chris Van Hollen, and you mentioned the Tea Party movement, Chris, and really kind of that movement kind of got swept into office 2 years ago. It's kind of interesting. A lot of them are in tough races now, and they've kind of changed their tune. They're saying, hey, we can work with the Democrats. I've worked with such and such, but you see them up close. Not sure if this is a fad or if this is here to stay. I mean, they're basically saying, hey, get the government off my back. A lot of them, still try to bring a lot of money into their districts. I mean, there was a very conservative Republican nominated Senator Ted Cruz down there in Texas was just elected. So it seems like more Tea Party types are getting elected. But you see it up close, Chris. What do you think? Is it a fad, or is it here to stay, or is there hypocrisy here, or is they have something good to say?
Well, whether or not they're here to stay is going to depend on the judgment rendered by the American people. I mean, in this election and in coming elections, there's no doubt that there's a little bit of an element of hypocrisy in the sense that these are folks who sometimes say, well, we don't want any government involvement at all, except for when we want government involvement to help our district. But then there are others that just see absolutely no role for the government in the affairs of the country, with the exception of just the Pentagon. I mean, a lot of these guys would just eliminate all government involvement except for the defense, and that would include, radically changing Medicare, radically changing Social Security, gutting the essential functions of the federal government. So I don't think the American people are going to stand for that. But in terms of their conduct so far, again, you've seen a totally uncompromising bunch. I mean, they take pride in their refusal to sort of meet people halfway to try and work these things out. And I don't think you can conduct our national affairs with people who are unwilling to make compromise at the end of the day.
And I don't know if it's an honor or privilege. I think it's an honor or privilege, but you've been selected to play Paul Ryan in debates preparation with Vice President Joe Biden, and you're both on the Budget Committee. He's the ranking majority leader, I guess, in the Budget Committee. You're the Democratic leader, but how do you go about doing that, Chris? I mean, do you have to get yourself all worked up and kind of read his positions and how's?
Well, he's the chairman of the committee, and I'm the top Democrat, and we get along well personally, but we have very deep differences on policy issues. I think what he's proposed for the country in terms of his budget is way the wrong way. So I was asked by the vice president's team if I could help on debate preparation, since I know how Paul Ryan likes to present his arguments. I've sort of got his lines memorized. I got to work on my gestures and things. I'm going for my Academy Award here, but the idea is to have some sparring partner for the vice presidential candidate. All of the main presidential, vice presidential candidates do this to prepare, and I hope I can be of some help to the vice president.
Chris, you've seen a lot in politics. You've been through a lot of elections, but what's at stake in this election? I mean, you consider this, I'm not talking about your race personally, but do you consider this presidential race, this vote in November, to be the most important that you've been involved with?
Well, it's certainly one of the most important. There's one thing that both the Romney-Ryan campaign and the Obama-Biden campaign agree on, which is that this is a huge fundamental choice in direction for the country. And if you look at what the president's proposing, he's saying, look, we had an economy that was in total free fall. We helped stop the free fall. We've turned the corner. We've now had 29 consecutive months of positive private sector job growth. We're not near where we want to be. But let's continue to invest in our people and come up with a long-term balanced deficit reduction plan. Whereas what Romney and Ryan are proposing is a total U-turn back to the failed trickle-down policies that not only cratered the economy and jobs, but drove up the deficit. As President Clinton said the other day, they want to double down on trickle-down. Well, we know that doesn't work. It works for people like Mitt Romney. It works for folks at the very high end of the income scale. It doesn't work for the country. And so this is a huge choice. And with respect to my campaign, that's an important race as well.
You're up for election every 2 years, and you're running. Your name is on the ballot, of course. And there's some important Montgomery County issues too that I wanted to get to. And one is, everybody talks about traffic. You have Walter Reed Hospital that was in the District of Columbia, kind of combined with Bethesda Naval, but that's something that's on your radar screen.
Well, this was a big deal. So the old Bethesda Naval Hospital has now become the National Military Medical Center, Walter Reed, and it's the major hospital for treating our wounded warriors. And we're proud to have it in our community. We need to make sure that people get the very best care. We need to make sure also that folks in the community can continue to get back and forth to work and in their daily lives. And so I was really pleased that we were able to get about $90 million from the federal government to support traffic mitigation issues around there. So we're going to have a new metro exit on the hospital side of Wisconsin Avenue. We've got additional monies for intersection improvement. As you know, NIH is right across the street. So this is a very congested area to make sure that our constituents can get back and forth, as well as wounded warriors and the doctors get into the hospital. I'm pleased we got these funds.
Another issue I know that's on your radar screen is the power company Pepco. We had the big storm, I think it was called a Derecho, or back in June 2012, and you weren't too pleased about their performance, especially compared to, I think it was Dominion Power that
Right.
you compared them to.
Well, look, there's no doubt this was a very severe storm, and I want to say to all the linesmen and women who were out there working every day, they did a great job. But in terms of Pepco's performance, in terms of communicating with constituents and getting the power restored, I thought that they did very poorly. And I think it's only fair that we compare them to other nearby utilities that faced the same storm, like Dominion Power, which got a lot of the down power lines and power restored much more quickly, given the fact that they were even harder hit. So if you look at how quickly it took Dominion to restore lots of power for its customers, they got a lot of people back up and running faster. It took them both about a week to get the last person restored, but Dominion had a lot more customers without power, and yet they were able to get most of them up faster.
Seems like a recurring thing with Pepco. They're going to do better, but then the next big storm hits. But do you think at some point when it's on your radar screen that it's going to resonate with Pepco?
Well, I think that the Public Service Commission has got to make sure they hold Pepco accountable. They got to look at performance, and they should make sure that any rates are tied directly to performance. And if the General Assembly needs to change additional laws, and I'm not sure they do, but they're going to be looking at this, then they need to do it, because at the end of the day, Pepco's got to make sure that its customers are treated properly, not just its shareholders. I mean, they focus a lot on make sure their shareholders get a return, but often at the expense of customers in our area.
Chris, the next issue, there was an article in the Gazette, and it's kind of somewhat of an obscure issue, but it's still important to a lot of people, and that is the Bethesda post office. The Postal Service closed one post office in Bethesda right there on Wisconsin Avenue because there wasn't any parking. But then they located the post office to another location where there's still no parking.
Yeah, this was so yeah, you're right, all politics is local here. This was a really bad decision by the post office. I mean, this is kind of malpractice because they moved it to a new location without figuring out what the parking arrangements were going to be. Well, it doesn't do you a whole lot of good to have a post office if your customers can't park,
especially at holiday time.
Well, that's right. You know how these post offices get jammed. So we've been working very hard to try and get the post office to either come up with a different parking arrangement, or they're going to have to move to a place where people can park, because it makes no sense to have a post office that nobody can have access to.
I mean, they just opened this, but do you think they'll move? I mean, now you're saying, hey, you need to relocate. This is bad for people.
Well, unless they can somehow resolve this parking situation, which they have not yet been able to do, then they're going to have to move, in my opinion. But we'll have to see. We're going to keep pushing.
But Chris, you started in the Maryland House of Delegates. You moved to the Maryland Senate. Now I think you're running for your 6th term, if I'm not mistaken, in the U.S. Congress. And you've seen a lot. You've kind of been in the trenches. But you still see stuff that surprises you. And also, are you still bullish on politics and America?
Oh, I'm still very bullish on America. I believe in our country. I believe in its people. I believe ultimately we get to the right decision. And we've got some big decisions coming up because we've got to remain competitive in this global economy. I mean, you've got rising powers like China and India. We got to focus on investing in education for our kids, from early education to K through 12 to college, making sure people can afford to go to college. We got to invest in our infrastructure. I mean, we're a great country because we have a system that allows individuals to take the initiative and entrepreneurial spirit. That is a big part of it. But we're also a great nation because of our ability to work together in the past to make these big national investments. At the Republican convention, they talked about Neil Armstrong, as they should, celebrating a great American success story. That is made possible not just by individuals working alone, but by us working together on a common national goal. And if we're going to win the competition of this century globally, we've got to be willing to do that again.
Mm-hmm. As you kind of address tough votes and tough issues, do you apply kind of a set of principles that you've developed over the years, kind of how you see things, kind of how a prism that you look for, or is it kind of you take them as, take the issues as they come along, or do you kind of have, kind of issues and?
Well, I would say the basic fundamental principle with I approach things is that in our country we want to have a system where every American, regardless of their background, regardless of who their parents were, has an opportunity to be successful, to live the American dream. And we don't guarantee success. and we shouldn't guarantee success, but we certainly should give everybody the opportunity who's willing to work hard and wants to succeed to be successful, to give them the tools. And that is sort of the fundamentals behind the American dream. That's why people came to this country, because it was a place of opportunity, a place where they could make it. And we need to make sure that that continues to be alive for people.
Chris, looking back at your own life, who would you say, I mean, you've made some tough decisions to run. You ran for Congress. It had to be the toughest congressional race in the United States when you first ran. You defeated Mark Shriver, and then you defeated the Republican incumbent. So you've really taken some big chances in your life. But looking back, it's different forks in the road. Who would you say kind of helped you along? Who would you look back and say, these are my heroes?
Those are always difficult questions. There's no doubt that it starts with my parents. My parents were big believers in public service. I wasn't necessarily one of these guys who thought about running for office myself early on, but I was interested in serving the country in some way. I used to work on national security issues a while back during the Cold War. And they inspired me. There are other people. I remember when I was, I'm a foreign service brat. I grew up many of my early years overseas.
Your dad was an ambassador?
He was ambassador to Sri Lanka. And I remember being in school in India where we were asked to give a speech, and I chose the Martin Luther King I Have a Dream speech. In India, of course, Gandhi had been a hero, and he'd been a hero to Martin Luther King Jr. So there are lots of, influences in my life politically. I think that if you go back to some of the Republicans, you've got Teddy Roosevelt and people like Abraham Lincoln who had some principles. I used to work for Mac Mathias. He was a moderate Republican. So I think there are folks in both parties and people who are out of politics like Dr. King and Gandhi and others that I think have shown how people of conscience and principle can help change things, change the world for the better. And I hope to be able to play a small part in making our community and our country a little stronger.
Thank you. Congressman Chris Van Hollen, Maryland's 8th District. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Really
it's always
appreciate
good to be with you.
And thank you everybody for joining us. I'm Charles Duffy. This is Political Pulse. We'll see you next week.
So, same time next week?
Well, of course.
Put away a few bucks, feel like $1 million. For free tips to help you save, go to Feed the Pig.
The average text takes your eyes off the road for nearly 5 seconds. At highway speeds, that's enough time to travel the length of a football field. Stop the texts, stop the wrecks.
Over 1 million Americans at risk of foreclosure have been helped by making home affordable. Find out now what your options are.
Home where I belong.